Hello viewers, welcome to the Editorial Analysis by Drishti IAS. In this section, we regularly take editorials from various newspapers and news portals for a better understanding of various issues happening in India and around the globe. Dear viewers, in this section, we first try to link the editorial with our UPSC syllabus. Then we go analytical in order to understand some key points and at last some important concepts. Dear viewers, we truly hope that you like this initiative taken by Drishti IAS and your feedbacks are important for us. So kindly feel free to give your important feedbacks in the comment section. So without any further delay, let's commence our session.
Dear viewer, this video is available in Hindi as well. If you wish to watch it, please visit our Hindi YouTube channel, Drishti IAS. For your convenience, the link for this video in Hindi has been provided in the description below.
Today's editorial is taken from The Hindu, published on 3rd of March 2021. The title of today's editorial is Reviving the Iran Deal. If we try to summarize today's editorial, we can say that Joe Biden needs to seal the nuclear deal before the hardliners get an upper hand in Iran. If we try to link today's editorial with our UPSC syllabus, we can link it with polity, constitution, governance, and primarily international relations. Some key points from today's editorial. United States President Joe Biden's attempt to revive the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that is JCPOA, better known as the Iran nuclear deal, have not seen any breakthrough, with both sides waiting for the other to blink. The Biden administration says it would return to the deal if Iran starts complying with its terms. Now viewers, we know that in 2015, Iran agreed to rein its nuclear program in a 2015 deal, which was stuck with Iran and other countries like United States, United Kingdom, Russia, China, France, and Germany. Now, this agreement was called as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in which Tehran agreed to significantly cut its store of centrifuges, enriched uranium, and heavy water. All of these are important component for nuclear weapons. The JCPOA established the Joint Commission with the negotiating parties all represented to monitor implementation of the agreement. Now, what exactly was the reason why Iran agreed to the deal? Now, the reason because of which Iran agreed to the deal was that it was hit by devastating economic sanctions by the United Nations, United States, and European Union. And it was estimated that these sanctions have costed almost tens of billions of pounds every year in lost oil export revenues. Also, billions of overseas assets of Iran, they were also frozen. Now, United States governance, it got recently changed and Joe Biden came into administration. And he said that he is actually willing to revive the Iran nuclear deal. However, nothing significant has happened from both the sides, as both sides are in the opinion that both the sides have to comply to each other's terms. Tehran is of the opinion that it has asked the United States, which unilaterally quit the deal under the Donald Trump administration in May 2018, to return to the agreement first and lift sanctions on Iran. Now, Tehran is saying that United States, who left the deal from one side, United States said under Trump administration that we do not trust Iran and we are actually leaving this deal. So, according to Trump and various other opponents of this Iran nuclear deal, was that it is actually flawed, because according to the deal, Iran is having access to billions of dollars, but it is actually not addressing its support for various things that United States has asked for. United States asked Iran that it has to take strict actions against various terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. Also, it was said in the deal that Iran has to stop the development of ballistic missiles. But Iran has not done anything significant in that part. Also, Iran is regularly making sure that they are going in a very different direction away from the nuclear deal. That means whatever was committed by Iran, Iran is not fulfilling it. Now, this was according to Donald Trump and his administration. Tehran says this thing very clearly that first of all, United States has to come into the deal, then has to lift all the economic sanctions. Only after this, any conversation can begin between the two parties. The European Union's effort to organize the direct United States and Iran talks were also unsuccessful as Tehran reportedly rejected the offer. Iran has accelerated its nuclear program. This game of chicken continues as the clock is ticking, and Iran will elect a new president in June. Now, also in the meanwhile, the European Union, they actually tried to create a talk between both United States and Iran, but the process completely failed because it was absolutely rejected by Tehran. In the meanwhile, Iran has also accelerated its nuclear program. Now, when I'm talking about the acceleration of the nuclear program, Iran is now operating 60 IR-6 advanced centrifuge. Such a centrifuge can produce enriched uranium 10 times as fast as the first generation IR-1, which is actually allowed under this particular accord. That means Iran has speeded up its nuclear program. Now it is very high time for both the parties because United States has to see that the new president will be elected in Iran in the month of June. And if a hardliner comes, anti-US president comes, then things are going to be very difficult in order to arrive on a common conclusion. Hassan Rouhani, who bet his presidency on the deal, only to be repudiated by Mr. Trump, cannot stand in a third consecutive election. Now, one of the most important issues here is that Mr. Hassan Rouhani, who actually agreed to the nuclear deal and was criticized in Iran, will not be contesting the elections for the third time. So definitely a new face is about to come. There is no guarantee that a moderate like Mr. Rouhani would be elected this time. And it is not a secret that there is considerable opposition among the hardliners. A powerful constituency towards any kind of engagement with the United States. Mr. Biden's best bet is to get the nuclear agreement back on track before Mr. Rouhani leaves office. Now, the only opportunity or the only option that right now is present in front of United States is that it has to make sure that the deal gets finalized while the time Mr. Rouhani is in chair, because it is expected that this time the group of hardliners, they are having a very great approach towards the election, and chances are quite high that a hardliner might become the next president of Iran. The present scenario, to be sure, Mr. Biden has moved out with a sense of urgency after assuming power. He appointed a special envoy for Iran, showed signs of rebalancing ties with Saudi Arabia, and sent clear signals to Tehran about America's desire to get back to the deal. But these actions do not seem to be enough to rebuild the trust after the acrimonious Trump years. Some of Iran's concerns are genuine. See, Mr. Biden, since the day he has assumed the presidency of United States, he is working towards this direction. But Iran has got its own concern. There was a time when Iran actually trusted on United States and signed the deal. But the kind of attitude, behavior Donald Trump showed against Iran was definitely something that Iran has its own reservations about. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack, Iran had cooperated with the US in the war against the Taliban. Also, it should not be forgotten that Iran has supported United States of America completely during their war against terrorism after the infamous 9/11 attacks. But once the Taliban were driven out of power, the Bush administration branded Iran as a part of an axis of evil along with Iraq and North Korea. So while the time Iran was supporting United States of America, they were very happy. But once Taliban were actually driven out of power in Afghanistan, the George Bush administration came up with weird statements like it is Iran, Iraq, and North Korea who are actually responsible for the terrorism. Now, this actually led to the situation where both Iran and United States of America they started observing differences. As President Barack Obama offered diplomacy, the Iranians grabbed the opportunity, leading to the signing of JCPOA in 2015. But Iran is also in a very tough spot, hit by a sanction and various devastating COVID-19 outbreaks. Its economy is also bleeding. It had violently cracked down on protest in September 2019-2020, the embers of which are still burning. Now, we all know after George Bush left the power and Mr. Barack Obama became the president, so he came up with JCPOA, which was gratefully accepted by Iran. But later on, the deal could survive only for 3 years. Also, the situation in which Iran right now is, it is also facing a tremendous amount of economic sanctions. And because of all those sanctions, the economy in Iran is really in a very bad shape. The internal situation in Iran is also not very comfortable. There are regular protests, and the mechanism that is adopted by the government is very violent. So, among all such criticism, Iran has to do something significant. The way forward, its regional operations took a hit after Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by the United States in January 2020. Its assets in Syria are under repeated airstrikes by Israel. Now, one thing which is quite obvious here that Iran is regularly facing a lot of challenge from United States. Recently, we saw in January 2020 when one of the most famous military leaders there, Qasem Soleimani, was assassinated by the United States. Also, all the assets of Iran in Syria, they are regularly being air bombed by the Air Force of Israel. Last week, the United States had also bombed pro-Iranian militants in Syria. Both sides are now under tremendous pressure. United States also is taking many initiatives, especially in Syria. So, among all such circumstances, it is mandatory, it is required that the issue, this entire JCPOA Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, it has to be brought back into its existence, and it is to be made sure that yes, something substantial is taking place. Now, when we speak about such situations, there are various implications for India as well. One of the most implications where India could suffer is the oil and gas. Now, strictly it has been denied by every country that you cannot purchase crude oil from Iran. Now, India can be said as one of the largest suppliers. Now, if such is the situation, then definitely the international crude oil market will also face it. The impact on the world oil prices will be immediately visible. Impact of the US decision. Iran can be called as the third biggest supplier after Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and any increase in prices will hit both inflation level as well as the Indian rupee. Also, the Chabahar port, India's development in Chabahar port will be impacted. Then various other things are there where it is to be noted that both the countries have to come down on a common conclusion. Both sides need the deal. The United States wants to scuttle Iran's nuclear program, and Iran wants to relief from sanctions. They should stick to the diplomatic path for a breakthrough. Now, both sides have their own demands. The United States want to put a curb on the nuclear program of Iran, whereas Iran wants America to lift all the sanctions. Now, the only way through which these results can be achieved is just by diplomatic talks. So, it is important for leaders of both the countries that they should come up with such an idea where the disputes, the internal issues can be solved out. So viewers, this was with today's editorial analysis. A question that can be framed with reference to today's editorial is, what are the implications of the Iran nuclear deal and JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on India? Now viewers, I hope you liked today's editorial analysis. Thank you very much.